go over Konstantin Kisin and Francis Foster talking about the state of Britain, their analysis of politics, economics, and culture, and just how terrible it is, according to them. So let's get straight into the video.
What worries both of us is that I can't see any real signs of improvement, either culturally, socially, or economically. You know, I don't think people make this point enough, but the people that we're really screwing over this country are the young.
People in this country aren't having enough kids already. You want to make it harder for them? You want to make it harder for them to get on the housing ladder?
You wouldn't want to be here and be young.
What can we learn from America? What are they doing differently? Why are they growing and we're not?
I see our country as very much somebody who is an addict. We're addicted to mass immigration.
There
We're
it is.
addicted to debt, and we're addicted, like all addicts, to not face up to the truth. Eventually, you're going to hit rock bottom or you die.
You've got to stand up for what you believe. Because if you don't, the thing you believe is going to disappear.
It's so dramatic, isn't it? So, immigration, not inequality, not poverty, not the failures of neoliberalism over the last 40 years, how trickle down economics has just not happened, it's just stayed at the top. It'd be interesting to see if they even mention inequality, just the disparity of wealth and how it's increasing. Just obviously they won't, but maybe they will. We'll see.
So a lot of people in our audience and also our team thought it'd be good for us to have a chat. We did one after our trip to America, reviewing the election and all of that. Obviously, this one will be just as positive.
Absolutely. There's so much good stuff to talk about. What is possibly going wrong in the UK at the moment, apart from quite literally everything? It seems at the moment that the UK is in a funk, and that's not actually what worries me, and I know that's not what worries you. What worries both of us is that we're looking at our country, the country where we grew up in, and I can't see any real signs of improvement, either culturally, socially, or economically. And that is a very worrying place to be in. Wouldn't you agree?
I wonder what he means by culturally. What does he mean culturally? Like the arts? Or does he mean immigrants? I'm sure it's potentially immigrants changing culture.
Great.
Well, yeah, so the worrying thing is, obviously, we didn't expect this Labour government to be amazing. They're not amazing. The thing that worries me most about it is what they're doing is essentially driving the economy into the floor. And it's inevitable when you raise taxes to such a level that people basically leave or don't start businesses or don't take extra work.
Well, they've kind of not really raised taxes that much. They've kind of hampered themselves where they said they wouldn't raise tax. Yeah, they put VAT on private schools, national insurance has increased, but taxes were high under the Tories. And Labour have got very few options. They increase taxes to fund public expenditure, to actually stimulate the economy, because that's the only way you stimulate economy is through spending, buying, investment in the country. That's what the Tories didn't do. They did austerity in response to the economic crash, where borrowing was at its lowest. They quantitative easing, austerity, raising tax, and doubled the debt. And Labour are going to continue that. They continue austerity. They've got a few options. Raise taxes further, which isn't popular, or change the economic paradigm, which also they're not going to do. And I'm pretty sure they're not going to talk about that. The fact that neoliberalism has failed on its own terms. It does not lead to prosperity. It's stagnates wages. There's no growth in the economy over the last 20 years. And that's capitalism. He can blame the government, but the government bailed out the banks. The government bailed out businesses in COVID. The government has invested in infrastructure like subsidies for railways, subsidies for water. Like the government is constantly bailing out businesses, but it won't do it to the average man on the street. So, yeah, we're in a difficult place where we need radical change. And that's what people want. Like Donald Trump is a symptom of people just want a different system. Like Reform, they want something different, which is ironic because Reform and Donald Trump are just going to give you more of the same, but deeper tax cuts for the wealthy, less regulation, less workers' rights, less public spending, which will make lives even worse. So, yeah, but I guarantee he will not actually talk about the elephant in the room, which is economic inequality, the failures of capitalism, the rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and how we need to actually redistribute wealth, tax wealth, capital gains tax, really rein in tax havens, go after the wealthy because they've got so much money that they don't spend. They don't spend it. We can spend it. The government can spend it on a whole raft of things: schools, hospitals, infrastructure, high speed rail. There's so much that wealth could stimulate the economy.
Because it just doesn't make any sense anymore. So the tax approach that they've taken just seems completely crazy. And then you have to look at the fact
lowering taxes right now would not help. It would not help at all. So the only option is to raise the taxes to invest in infrastructure. Like, cut public spending more? Will that help? I mean, he probably agrees with that, but it objectively would not help the situation.
look, it's early days, but I don't get the sense that the Conservative Party has recovered from its demise of last year. Do you?
No, not at all. To me, the Tory party I kind of see them actually like the Democrat Party in the US. They've betrayed people's trust. They have fundamentally failed. Essentially,
Not really. Like, America has the strongest economy in the world. They even acknowledged that in a minute. And Biden did some good stuff. The Inflationary Reduction Act, strong on unions. Yeah, there was stuff to do. But let's not act like it was a landslide. That's the people thinking like, oh, Donald Trump has a mandate. He won by 1.5% on the popular vote. It was incredibly close. It could have gone the other way so easily, and we would not be having these conversations. We'd be having the conversation of like, oh, the death of the Republican Party, Trump, who's going to precede Trump, who can fill that void. Trump was the Republican Party. We'd have a whole new conversation, potentially on 10,000, 20,000 people votes. It's so close in America. It's like a couple of states that determine it. So, yeah.
worse than the Dems. The Dems had 4 years. This has been 14 years
True.
of complete, abject, and total failure.
See, I was thinking of doing a joke there about the Tory leader not having dementia, but then I actually had to think who the last Tory leader was, because there was so many of them and they were all equally useless.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that we learned from the Tory leaders is that all diversity really gives you is a bunch of leaders who are all equally crap. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
And so we just
What?
had Kemi Badenoch on the show.
Is that why Rishi Sunak was thingy? He's a wealthy guy. Like, were they going, oh, we need, after Boris Johnson and Theresa May and Liz Truss, it's too many white people, let's have Rishi Sunak. Was that? No, he was just popular because of COVID. He was the Chancellor. I don't think he was necessarily a so-called DEI hire. I mean, Kemi Badenoch, you could argue that, but is she? I don't know. Like, that's the thing. They just see diversity now as a bad thing. Like, oh, if a woman, like, also good at... Would they say that about a Thatcher? Of course they wouldn't. They wouldn't be like, she's a DEI hire, because they like Thatcher. So it's just generally people they don't like. It's a DEI hire when, like, they don't align with their views. It's such an inconsistent thing. It's like the idea that people that aren't white men shouldn't have a chance, or like we shouldn't try and like have a diversity, especially like in Parliament where there's very few working class people. It's mostly like Oxbridge, privately educated people. Like, is that all he wants? Do they represent the population of the UK? Should we not have some working class voices? Is that DEI? Well, technically it is. So would they be opposed to that? They probably would, actually, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
And she's got a very difficult job. I think she's smart. I think Kier Starmer's smart, by the way. Too. People don't like hearing this, but I think the leaders of both parties are pretty smart. I think Kemi's smart, but the job she has of uniting basically the Lib Dems in her party with the reform curious people in her party just seems very, very difficult.
I was talking to a very, very senior member, senior figure in the Conservative Party, and I said to him, "We're going to be interviewing Kemi in a week or so. What should I say to her?" He laughed and said the words, "She's fucked." That's what he said, and for those exact reasons that you've just stated. What you have with the Tory party, and it's a criticism or an observation we've both made about the Labour Party, is you're trying to hold together this broad coalition of people that fundamentally don't belong in the same political party.
Well, look, all political parties are coalitions, but it just seems to me that there isn't an understanding on those different wings of the party that if they do not correctly understand why they lost the last election and adjust accordingly, they are also going to lose the next one. And in the Kemi interview, I told the story about.
But what can the Tories do? Like, what options do they have? They ran in the immigration. That's not going to work. They're not going to lower immigration. What? They're going to run on the economy. Well, they're not going to cut taxes. We know that. They're not prudent with money, even though there's that myth that somehow, Reagan increased the deficit massively in America, Republicans, George W. Bush, and then Trump. He's going to raise the deficit again. And then you've got now the Tories. What are they going to run on? What, they're going to be reform light? They've got one option, like go more centrist, which people don't want generally. There's a certain they get some votes, they'll do well, but people are so polarized. Like, people want reform type things. Well, a small amount of people, not a lot of people, or they want Green Party, something a bit more more of a socialist alternative, a Bernie Sanders, a Jeremy Corbyn, a left wing populism. Kemi Badenoch will be gone in the next year, but who's going to replace it? Because what's your vision for conservatism? Like, apart from immigration, take immigration out of the thing. Like, what do conservatives offer? Nothing. It's just the same old economic status quo.
A Tory MP who said to me they lost to the Lib Dems. Well, if that's your attitude, you're going to get destroyed by reform. That's just a fact. The other problem is,
I don't think so. Like, in the next 3 years, 4 years, a lot's going to happen. And it really gets down. Already we're seeing decline in terms of polls for reform, in terms of what they think about Trump. So Trump has a clear relationship with Farage. And the worse Trump does, people will go, and there's already splits in the reform base where they are questioning, is Farage just another politician? Is he, because he's part of the political establishment, he's been in politics for 30 years plus, is he just another Tory? And Trump won't deliver. Already he's creating chaos in the markets, geopolitical alliances. Reform could make a comeback, but a lot's going to happen in that time. And if Trump doesn't deliver, reform are screwed.
that I think that the one thing a lot of politicians haven't caught up to in this country is something that became quite obvious in America, which is the time for hedging your bets and kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth and having a view that you hold privately but not expressing it publicly because you think it's going to offend people or whatever. I just don't think that's the moment we're in. I don't think that's the media environment we're in anymore, really. If as podcasts like ours become more prominent in the conversation, those same tactics just don't work nearly as well on a hour, 2 hour conversation where the presenters are really engaging with you in good faith, but they also expect their questions to be answered. And I think that's true across the political spectrum. I think Nigel Farage is the exception to that, but the reason he's an exception to that is he's not really a politician or hasn't been for a long time. But also,
He is a politician. He is very much a politician. He knows the game. He knows how to not answer questions. He knows how to directly answer questions when it favors him. He is a politician, very much so. He wears a suit. He's very gifted rhetorically. He is pragmatic. He is a politician. Like, even more than Trump is. Trump is a salesman. Trump is a snake oil salesman. Like, he will just tell you what you want to hear. He is very good at just like buttering people up and going, yeah, we're going to make America great again. We're going to do all this great stuff, and then not delivering.
because he has the luxury of being an outsider. If he were in the position,
He's really not in some ways, but not really. He's firmly part of the media establishment. The media love him. He gets clicks. He gets interviews. Way more than the Green Party. Like, the Green Party are outsiders. They are not. They don't get a look in. And then you've got his relationship to Trump and the billionaire class, businesses. He is firmly part of the political establishment. He's been there since Brexit. Like, he was the figurehead of Brexit. He got pretty much single-handedly Brexit into the public consciousness. Or arguably immigration as well. He pushed immigration as this big thing that we solve this and then there'll be milk and honey, gun drop smiles on the street. Life will be great again. We'll go back to this like illusory past and we'll be strong culturally and economically.
where he was leading one of the two major parties, he'd be getting asked much more difficult questions as well, and he would either have to take difficult positions. For example, he's never really been properly challenged on his views about the NHS because he knows what most people know: it's not sustainable to have it free at the point of use. He knows that we're going to have.
Why not? It does work. Like, in 2010, it was one of the best in the world. It has to be funded properly. It has to be a priority that people have it as care. Like, if you go to the private healthcare system, when you put that profit incentive in it, that's when you have real waste. That's why America has one of the most expensive and least efficient healthcares, because you're just paying private insurers just so much money. Why put the middleman in it when you can actually have a system that, when funded properly and when it's your priority, was the best in the world? The Tories have systematically undermined and destroyed, underfunded the NHS. They know what they're doing. He knows he's lying, but it's because it represents a socialist view of the world. And that's the direction they don't want to go. Even though people love the NHS, it's a national institution, they don't want to go, yeah, that's actually how you deal with things like taxes. We need to invest in the country and pool together, pool our resources, and that means you at the top as well, to actually invest in our children, our healthcare, the country. They talk about patriotism. They talk about making the country great again. How would you do that? It's not by profiting. It's not by making businesses, get huge dividends for their shareholders. It's about actually investing in the country, in the people. They're not going to talk about that. I guarantee them they can't talk about it.
To make some kind of adjustment. Has he been pushed enough on that? Well, not so far, right? So, but it just seems to me like the moment for political talk is kind of moving into the past, and as conversations move into spaces like this, you're going to have politicians who are just prepared to say the truth, even if it's uncomfortable. And if they get criticized for it, they then turn the tables and say, "Look, I'm just saying
What does that even mean? Because, I'm guarantee how Trump talks in private is very different to public. Like, it's all politicians. Like, they're having real conversations, private conversations about what they can do, and then they are very different in public. Like, what the hell is he talking about?
People are thinking the media has now turned this into some kind of pantomime. It's very stupid. Let's ignore them. Let's just focus on this.
But then what you're asking for is politicians to have backbone, integrity, and courage.
Yes.
And we haven't had that for a long time in politics.
Look at Trump, right? You can think Trump is the worst person ever. He has those things.
He's so weak. He's flip-flopping in tariffs. He is actually one of the most indecisive presidents. In private, he's constantly indecisive. He's like got really low self-esteem. He's either like really like this blind positivity or he's depressed. Like he is almost like just one or the other. He has no integrity. He will just go where he's told to. Like with Doge and Elon Musk, he'll just follow the line of like, he'll be told what to do. He's so inconsistent. You never know what you're going to get with Trump because sometimes he'll follow his aides and he'll be like, right, lawyers have told me this, intelligence has told me this. And then other times he'll be like, no, he's just going to go against them because maybe he's a bit tired. Like he's so inconsistent. If there's man with no integrity, it's Donald Trump. Like, give me an example of Donald. I'd love to ask them. Like, give me an example of Donald Trump showing integrity. Like, do they even know what that word means?
Now, you may dislike his policy positions, but he was prepared to say what he thinks, to say things that are politically incorrect but that need saying, to do things that...
It's really not true. Like, he was a Democrat until, like, pretty much, like, the 20s, 2010s. He was a Democrat. He was a Hillary Clinton supporter. He was moderate. He was pro-life. Pro-choice, sorry. That was his political positions. And then he became more radical when he thought, like, actually, yeah, like, I can be the leader. And that's how you get people excited by, like, the wall he was going to build was an accident. That was just an idea that he didn't know what to say. And it kind of like, they was talking about it and they were like, oh yeah, the wall. And then all of a sudden that resonated. And then he went with that. The man has no integrity. He has no values. He doesn't care about trans people. He doesn't really care about immigration. He benefits from it. Like, was it the Trump Tower was built by illegal immigrants and immigrants? Like he has no values. He doesn't care about this stuff. Like he just uses it because he knows it will get him in power. It's like what people want to hear, or that's the vibe of the time. Immigration is the thing now that everybody is obsessed with. Like, oh God.
Some people aren't going to like and are going to scream about. And, you know.
Yeah, like grabbing women by the private parts. Oh God, they're so politically correct.
Other than Ukraine, when I look at everything that they're doing, I think this is incredible.
Yeah. But I think one fact...
Really? Like cutting jobs, IRS jobs, like tariffs. Like, what are they doing actually that's good? Like this isn't going to benefit. They're not reduced grocery prices. Inflation is predicted to go up 6%. Like the markets are unsure. Businesses are going to be impacted by the tariffs. Like, what is he actually doing? Like, in 4 years' time, what will Trump's greatest achievement be economically? Like, we're already seeing potentially a recession and economic crash in the next few years. Like,
factor that we're missing in this conversation about Trump is British sensibilities.
Yes, but this is the point that I've made a lot, especially privately. The British equivalent to Donald Trump does not have to look like Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a product of American culture. And the thing that offends the sort of avocado toast brigade in the UK about him is the way he talks. Well, guess what? It's kind of how most Americans talk.
What? Is it? No, what offends him is the fact he's a fraudster, he's a criminal felon, numerous allegations of sexual assault, his relationship with Epstein, the fact that he's never been held accountable for his actions. He's been bankrupt 6 times. There's so much if an average politician did that, they'd be gone. Trump is a very special boy. He's an anomaly that in a different timeline, just the world would be very different. And to act like we just need a Donald Trump, or it's like, does he really believe what he's saying? I don't know if he does. Maybe he does, but
Very direct, or they're very to the point. They don't mess about. They say things in plain language.
America's a massively divided country. It has been since the Civil War. Like, it is it's a big place. It's culturally diverse. Like, New York is very different to Minnesota, to Arkansas, to Texas, to California, Washington. It's a country with 50 countries. Really is diverse. A lot of people don't like Trump. They act like everyone's like this kind of outspoken, like, locker room talk. People love Trump. Yeah, there's a lot of people who do love Trump. There's a lot of people who really despise what he values, like his individualistic kind of property mogul, like big talking, bravado. A lot of people don't buy into that, really don't like him. So he's not being honest here. He needs to be honest. Like, America's a deeply divided country. Deeply divided. Like the UK, like a lot of countries.
It's actually one of the big cultural differences between the UK. Like, even if you look at the way they name certain things, like if we have some kind of weird fruit, we have a Latin name for it, right? Or something like that. They just call it a prickly pear.
Yeah.
What is it? It's a prickly pear.
Yeah.
So that kind of simple direct approach is not necessarily exactly what we need. We don't necessarily need someone who behaves in exactly the way that Trump does. We just need someone who is confident and comfortable in what they believe and is prepared to say, I believe this, even if you don't agree with it.
Yeah. It sounds like...
I mean, you could argue Kier Starmer does that. Like, he's confident, fairly confident in what he believes. He says it. Like, we don't need that. We need someone who truly engages people in the real problems they face. The reasons why they can't afford to pay their healthcare bills. The reasons why they can't afford a house. Like, Bernie Sanders does this. Like, the oligarchs. Like, that's the real thing. But it's not going to get through because you've got such a massive ecosystem of right-wing media, these guys, that tell you it's immigration, that tell you it's woke, it's DEI. And people believe it. People will be concerned about what they're told to be concerned about. Immigration is the prime example. You don't just spontaneously agree. Like, if you got rid of Fox News, the Daily Mail, Triggernometry, Joe Rogan, people spontaneously would have their eye at the people at the top. They would. They'd be like, wait a minute, why is Elon Musk the richest man on the planet? Why is he cutting Social Security and Medicaid? That's going to impact me. Why is he doing that? Why is he allowed to do that? Why is Donald Trump a failed businessman who was bankrolled by his father for numerous bankruptcies? Just awful person on every level. Why does he get to be in power? Like, people would have very different questions, but you have to drip feed constantly. Immigration, woke, DEI, just constantly like say, oh, the real problem is because of diversity quotas. That's the reason why civilization is collapsing.
What we need is actually a politician who's not afraid to embrace certain conservative values.
Such
I
as?
wouldn't look at them as conservative values, to be honest.
I'd love to ask him, like, what conservative values? Like, what Trump family values? No. His wife hates him. He's an adulterer. Stormy Daniels cheated on his first wife. I mean, has sex with prostitutes. Sexual assault allegations. He's not a family man. His family doesn't like him. A lot of his family don't like him. Like, what conservative values? Like, humility?
I don't look. You and I have this argument all the time, right? We were walking around London the other day, and you went to me, well, people keep saying I'm a conservative, and I've been thinking about that a lot. And I was like, there's nothing about what we are advocating for that's conservative. And we had a big argument.
They're so in denial. They have to pretend like people don't do this on the left. Like, I would never question that. Like, am I a conservative? Am I a left? Like, what am I? It's obvious who I am. Like, I believe in socialism, the fact that democracy power should be given to the majority of the people who work. I oppose capitalism, which is the ownership of the means of production. I think it should be given to the people who create the wealth, which is the majority. I think we should prioritize social well-being over profit. I think that freedom should be a priority in life. Like, how do we create a society that creates most freedom for the most people? And that means not just having to work 40 hours a week for very little. You actually own a part of your workplace, you have a stake in it, and that impacts positively on communities, mental health, meaning. People want something different. And the question, the fact that are we a conservative? Like, it's this, they're just in denial that they are. Like, they're just like, it's a it's a weird thing to like say that. Like, are we like, you should know that like conservatism is a political philosophy. Like, do you sit within that or not? Like, it's this very simple thing. Like,
which we can reproduce for people if you want.
Yeah. Well, it depends, because it depends what you mean by conservatism.
Yes.
But if what you mean by conservatism is wanting to conserve the country that we grew up in, with its values and its culture.
but again, that's so vague and nebulous. Like, the country isn't what it was in the 80s, 90s. Like, what do you mean by culture, values? Like, our values aren't capitalism, neoliberalism, capitalism. Like, they're not. Like, is it communities? Because neoliberalism is kind of opposed to community. It's very individualistic. Are we an individualistic country like America? Deeply individualistic? Are we more of a community-based country like Denmark, Finland, Norway? Like, we are having an identity crisis, and we're deeply divided, deeply polarized. There's different visions of what we want the UK to be. There's people on the left who want to go back to, I suppose, like a, 1945 socialism, high taxes the wealthy, redistribute, build infrastructure, and, make them pay their fair share. And then people who just want to get rid of regulation, smaller government, cut taxes, cut public spending. These are very different, like diametrically opposed. Which one are you? Like, they're trying to be centrist. Like, right wingers always pretend to be centrist. Like, I'm moderate, I'm not conservative. And then they'll list off the things they want, like conservative values. Which, again, is like conserving, like, what are you conserving, like 100 years ago? You want 1950s UK? You want 1930s? Like, what specific, like, are you picking, mixing? Like, you want a bit of this, but not that. Like, you want Morris dancing, but you don't want factory. Like, what is it you want?
If that's conservatism, then I would find it incredibly difficult to argue against that. If
But that's such a vague, like, what values, like, what are the past, like, be specific here. Like, what do you want to, because again, change is inevitable. I always say this, change is like, we're constantly changing. That is part of nature. Change. We're always changing. Like, technology, like how historical events impact on populations, wars, terrorism. Like, things are constantly changing. Like, the last 20 years is very different to 100 years ago. Like, what culture at that time would you want to preserve from 100 years ago? Or from Shakespearean time? Like, what from Shakespeare's London would you want to integrate into London now? Like,
if wanting your country to retain the good about it makes you a conservative, then I'd imagine the overwhelming majority of all people are conservative.
yes.
But what I'm talking about from a party political dimension is something else, which is, what are the things that you and I really fundamentally believe about this country? We believe that it should have a prosperous economy. We believe that it should have an aspirational mindset. We believe that illegal immigration is wrong and shouldn't be happening.
I was wondering where it was going. Like who doesn't believe in a strong economy? Like, we don't have it because of neoliberalism that's been stagnating for at least 15 years since the economic crash. Like, and then illegal immigration. No one, like, it's illegal. But to say it's the biggest problem, again, it's a smoke and mirrors diversion from the real issues of inequality and consolidation of power and wealth from the people at the top. Like, he's not talking about the real issues because he can't. Like, they never can.
Believe that this country should want to be influential and powerful in the world, and
why? Because we were in the past. Like, can't we keep why is that a necessity for us to be influential? Like, we are influential massively. We're probably one of the most influential countries in the world. Not as influential as we were 100 years ago, but we've got influence. Like, if you want more, you need to have a bold vision for the future and lead the future. Like, what is the world going to be like? Like, what vision do we have for the 21st century? With automation, AI, climate change, inequality, political instability, polarization. That's hard. There's no easy answer to those questions at all. And that's the point. Like, there's no one fix. They want to make it seem like immigration, like go back to a nativism, like nationalism, like we just need to go back to this. It ain't happening. We need to look to the future. Like, nostalgia has been one of the biggest poisons of our political landscape over the last 40 years. Like, always looking back like, oh, it was great then. No, we need to look about how we can make it great in the future. They won't talk about that because you have to then ask the real questions about climate change, which they don't want to talk about, automation, universal basic income, inequality. You have to ask the real questions. And this whole channel is not asking the real questions.com because they can't. They just structurally can't ask the real good stuff that we need to ask. And that's what politics used to be about. Economics. Like, is this economic system working? No. Let's move on. Let's change the paradigm. They will never talk about it.
Seek to advance its worldview and values around the world, right? Tony Blair believed all those things.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yes.
Tony Blair didn't want illegal immigration. Tony Blair wanted this country to be rich and prosperous. Tony Blair was elected on the
No one wants illegal immigration. He has to conflate refugees. Again, he has to conflate that refugee and asylum seekers, small boats, with illegal. No, it's not. Two very different things. It's legal to come to the UK through regular means. But he knows he's lying because, again, he can't talk about real issues and real solutions. It must be very nice to be in that kind of situation where you can make a lot of money and go, yeah, actually, we don't have to solve these problems at all. We can just talk about them. Insane.
promise of things being aspirational. And I'm not a Blairite. I'm just saying, within living memory, mine and yours, not someone who's in their 80s, all the things that you and I think about were consensus beliefs across the political spectrum. When I came to Britain in 1996, I'm tired of restating this, net legal immigration into Britain was 55,000 people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you still had National Front, you still had these far-right groups, the BNP. Like, you still had these people who oppose immigration. It's always going to be there because we're nativist, we're tribal, we're a little bit racist, and do we politically enable these instincts and go, yeah, we should keep England to English people? It's so ironic because he's an immigrant. Like, why is freedom of movement such an evil thing? Why do they oppose freedom so much? Well, they don't, for them. Other people, yes, they do.
And nobody cared about immigration in 1996. You know why?
They
Because
did.
It wasn't a problem.
They did. They actually did. We've been talking about immigration in the UK for at least 100 years. Go back to Jewish people, they wouldn't let in the 20s, 30s when they were being persecuted, the pogroms in Russia. And then what happened in Germany? They still didn't want to let them in. Like the Daily Mail famously praised Hitler. And then you had the post-war, like when after the war, people came from all over the world, India, the Caribbean, to rebuild our country for us, which we're so appreciative of now. People opposed it then, in the 60s, 50s, 60s. And then you had the National Front in the 80s, 90s, and then the early 2000s. Like, it's a boogeyman. It's so easy. It's so politically potent to just blame all your problems on the immigrants. Like, it wasn't a problem in the 90s. What's he talking about? They were talking about this stuff from personal experience. Like, oh, I felt this way. Like, look at the data. Look at the facts.
British people are very reasonable when it comes to these issues, right? But what's
We
happened
are.
is we've had such a mass wave of immigration that Lib Dems, Tories, a lot of Labour people, Reform, all feel that both mass immigration and illegal immigration, mass legal immigration and illegal immigration are both too high. Now, does that make...
Yeah, to an extent, it has got too high. But it's not the biggest problem we face. It's a mask to deal with neoliberalism, inequality. That's it. Like, they talk about that so they don't talk about anything else. Like, because again, let's say immigration, let's say they solved the immigration problem. That next year it went down to 50,000. Do you think they'd stop talking about it? What else would they talk about next? They always have to, they have to come up with these fantasies of like, oh, it's like some conspiracy theory, the Great Replacement, or whatever the conspiracy is of the day, and they create it. So they don't solve real problems, climate change, inequality. Like, it wouldn't go away.
Make you a conservative? I really don't think so. And I'm someone who believes that creative destruction is important, right? This is why I don't think of myself as conservative in that sense, because I think
Of course you
we need
don't.
to be making progress, and progress means letting go of things that no longer work.
Such as?
Technology changes, society changes, and whatever. What I don't believe is this progressive retardation, which says you've got to take all the best things about your society and say they're actually the worst things about your society.
Such as? It's always vague.
To me,
It's always vague, like the worst things, like what? Our colonial history? Our history of oppression? Or, like, history of slavery? Like, what are you talking about? Like, they're so fragile in this stuff. Like, we can criticize our history, and we can celebrate our history too. We can criticize the empire, and we can celebrate our defeating fascism. Like, he's so fragile. Like, sometimes you want to, like, he agrees with me. Like, progress is good. Like, what should we get away with? What should we, like, leave in the history books? And what should we move forward? Would he say capitalism? Would he accept that for the average person, capitalism has failed them in the last 40 years? No, he wouldn't. No, he wouldn't. That's the problem. That's the real problem we face.
This entire decade has not been about right versus left. It's been about progressive insanity versus everybody else.
No, I quite.
God. What? Like, what does that mean? Progressive insanity? No, it's been the wealthy who are getting away with everything, whilst we fight about immigration, and then they talk about woke. That's what it is. Like, but is that progressive insanity? Pronouns, yeah. It's pronouns. That's the reason why you can't afford a house. Not because the Tories didn't build enough houses. True insanity. Like, and people actually believe what he's saying. That's the true insanity. That's the true insanity.
I agree with you on that one. I think the element that you missed with the Blairite is the mass immigration really started under him.
Yes.
So, but broadly speaking, I'm in agreement with you. I guess for me, the issue is we have not defeated these hyper-liberals, progressive, whatever you want to call them, in this country.
Wokies?
No. When I look at our current government, I actually, and people they start to give me stink eye when I say this. I actually think Kier Starmer is very competent. And I think he's got a hell of a lot more integrity than the Conservative Party. Because he actually says what he thinks, by and large, and then he tries to implement the laws.
You don't remember how a year ago you didn't know what a woman was?
Right? Again, look,
God, it's. I need like a bingo mark of like what's a woman, DEI, woke, illegal immigration. Like, to an extent, what Francis is saying is right here. Like, you kind of know where you are with him, but also he did kind of pretend to be a lot more progressive than he actually is. So, yeah, he's not the most honest guy. But that kind of is that inevitable? I don't think it is. Like, if you don't, if you like him or loathe him, Jeremy Corbyn was honest. You know where he stood. Bernie Sanders, you know where he stands. Like, I'd say that with Trump, but he's constantly lying. Like, he's a liar. Like, he doesn't lie about being. Well, he kind of does lie about that as well. But anyone with a clear set of eyes knows that Trump's a liar.
Compared to look, all politicians are supine and whatever, and bend what they think and whatever else. My point is this: take freedom of speech. He's been very open that he wants hate speech laws. He's been very open. He did a video with Sadiq Khan talking about Islamophobia and the dangers of hate speech. They're talking about having blasphemy laws in this country. It's much better than the Conservatives talked right, govern left.
I don't know if it's better.
No, it's not better. I'm just saying he's got more integrity.
Yeah.
Don't disagree, boys. Come on, you have to agree.
I think that what they're doing on taxes, on education, all of this other stuff is going to be terrible for this country. And ultimately, that is what matters, because that's what's going to make people suffer.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, I agree with you. Look, I think the reality is that I think there's been a big loss of faith in both the major political parties in this country. And the question is reform, and to some extent the Lib Dems too, are they going to challenge that consensus?
Nope.
No. Well, I don't think the Lib Dems are. I see the Lib Dems as completely useless. I don't actually know what the point of a Liberal Democrat is.
They've got a lot more seats than Reform.
Well, that's true, but that hasn't answered my question. What is the point of a Liberal Democrat that don't believe in a liberal democracy and campaigned against Brexit once a Brexit referendum?
Well, I agree with you. Their position on Brexit was moronic. I'm just wondering whether...
Well, no, because most people actually oppose Brexit now. Most people in the UK realise it was a mistake, that they were lied to, that it hasn't benefited the economy objectively, that we didn't have cheaper clothes, footwear, and food. We were lied to. Will people realise that about immigration? I think they will one day. I think people will wake up to people like Trump, the demagoguery, the Farages, and go, actually, yeah, he lied to us, didn't you?
See, the big problem with Reform is, well, there's several problems with Reform. The most obvious one is that we don't live in a presidential system like the one that they have in America.
Yeah.
Donald Trump needed him and a small team of very influential, well-known people to drive his campaign forward. He had what? Him, RFK, Tulsi, Elon, Vivek, JD Vance.
Yes.
That's basically it.
Yes.
Of the top tier.
Of the top tier.
Yeah. Reform are going to have several hundred candidates elected as MPs. And you look, by all means, they're going to have the turquoise rosette pinned on them, but that's not going to necessarily win you an election in a lot of constituencies. You're actually going to have to be an effective campaigner for that position. Where are they going to get 300 people to do that?
It's a very good question.
That's problem number one.
Yes.
Problem number two is, we all know this, as things become bigger.
They'll get a few Tories, not that many, but Tories, and yeah, that's obviously a good point. But people will, there are activists out there. There will be people who run. They won't necessarily be competent, but I don't think that's their biggest problem.
You're more successful. Suddenly people start caring about who gets the credit and who's this and who's that and who's got how much power. And you already see these murmurings within Reform. People are saying, Nigel Farage needs to democratize the party.
Yeah, he's
all
not.
this other stuff, which I have to say, as an outside observer, I really don't agree with. If you look at what happened in America, there's no doubt about the fact that Donald Trump is the singular leader in that whole thing. Everything goes through him. And I think if you're in the sort of position where
So ironic. He talks about Western values, that under Western values are being eroded, and then he doesn't think a democratic party should be democratized. I mean, wow, insane.
you
Insane.
really have to make this kind of advance, you have to stick with the person who's the head of the organization.
Very
I completely agree with you, but then don't forget we're talking
Yeah, I completely agree with you that we should have an authoritarian structure in a democracy, and that the people who vote reform should not be able to elect their leader. What? I didn't expect this from them. Like, kind of mask off anti-democratic view there. Quite interesting.
about politicians
Yeah.
here. And, they're not averse to a little bit of the old backstabbing
Yeah.
in order to get what they want, or get ahead, or get to a position of power.
That's going to be a big problem for reform going forward. I have no doubt about that. That's their second challenge. So you've got the first one, which is where do you find the MPs, and the second one is what happens when the party starts doing well and suddenly everyone wants, a bit more power, a bit more credit,
Yeah.
and that's going to be another challenge for them.
No, it's going to be a major challenge for them. And the other thing that they're going to really...
What about Tommy Robinson? What about the people? A lot of people want remigration, aka mass deportations. What about Farage's relationship to Trump, and how, if Trump doesn't do well, Farage will be impacted by that? Like, again, they can't talk. They kind of have to come up with these problems, but like, Farage has bigger problems. Like, yeah, he won't be able to get probably the amount of councillors he needs, but most people are pretty divided on Farage. He's a love or hate figure, and you have to convince Tories to vote, a certain amount of Liberal Democrats, Labour, and he doesn't have the numbers. He doesn't have the numbers.
Really struggle with, I think, is, look, people are creatures of habit. They just are. You've got Tory voters who, it doesn't matter what the Tories can do. They could put up a paedophilic donkey and people would still vote for them.
True.
Those existed, mate.
Well, I'm sure you'd probably find it within the realms of the Conservative Party, right? And then you've got Labour.
They are, but people are kind of like people who maybe voted for like Labour in 2005, even 2010, potentially are going to vote reform. Like, I think in America, yeah, you're either Democrat or Republican, like, and maybe a few libertarians and independents. But times change. Like, Corbyn in 2019 did really well. Labour membership went up to 500,000. It's when people are given certain opportunities and like what they're offered. Like, if they're offered Trump or Kamala Harris, people are going to go to Trump. He's more exciting. He's a celebrity. He's a businessman. He's from The Office. He's constantly on social media. That's what you're given. And then you're giving Kamala Harris, well, who is she? Who the hell's that? I don't even know who that is. Like, people are creatures of habit in that way, but they kind of go with the social winds. Like, in the next 5-10 years, you will see a sweep back to progressivism. Like, in reaction to Trump, you will see people going, oh, okay, actually, he was too far. Let's go backwards to the left and like go more progressive. That's kind of what we've been having over the last 100 years, at least.
People who are just entrenched within those parties.
Yeah.
It's going to take a lot for them to then say, I'm not going to vote Tory, I'm not going to vote Labour, I'm going to vote Reform. And to a lot of people as well, there is a hesitancy around Farage.
Yeah.
Just is. And they see him as a toxic figure and a toxic influence.
He is.
Can he be that unifying figure to
No.
bring people together?
No, he's too divisive.
And be able to mount a strong challenge for number 10.
Well, he's not going to win over the Green Party voters, right? For when you talk about uniting figure, but what he needs to unite is the centre and the centre right.
Not happening. Not happening.
Right? Yeah, but like, for instance, my dad, who is centre right, told me that he would never vote for him.
What,
Good lad.
No. He just doesn't. His words, he's too right wing.
Yeah, he is. He's far right. He is.
Interesting. What does he mean by that?
He means that he's too right wing on economics.
He supports the AFD, supports Trump. Like, he's so in denial about his political points. He has to like say, "Oh, I'm so moderate," even though like he is very right wing. Like, why is he like? Why can't he own their own values?
He doesn't like his view on economics.
Well, that is another huge problem for reform because all the people at the top of the party are all small government people.
Yeah.
And, you know, Matt Goodwin's been on our show a gazillion times to make this point, which is, you know, Britain is left wing on economics and right wing on culture. I got to be honest with people and say that.
Right wing and culture. What does that mean? See, dog whistles there. What do you mean culture? What does that mean? Like, that's such a broad generalization. We're a very polarized country right now.
A popular thing. Being left wing on economics isn't going to work. It's not going to work. This European attitude that we have, and I contrast this with America, where they want to be unleashed, to be free, to do the things that they want to do, to make money, to build a business, to be successful. Europeans, we want to be looked after.
No, we don't. We want to have the regulations, we want to have the safeties, and we do want to be able to create our own businesses. But we want small businesses to be dominated, not the big monopolies. So he's creating a false equivalency there, like a lie of like, oh, like, no, we want safety nets. We want businesses that provide value, and we want people to have a good life. Like, I'm sorry, Europe is better than America. You want to talk about values? Like, Europe has a more collectivist view of, yes, we have social safety nets. Yes, we have healthcare, universal healthcare. Yes, we look after our own people. We look after disabled people. We look after vulnerable people. America is deeply individualistic, deeply like, all I care about is myself. That's it. I'll vote for that. I don't care about my neighbor. And that's why they're such a sick country. That's why they've got many problems. And yeah, it's not going well so far.
I don't see that as an option going forward. That's not the economic climate we're heading into.
It is.
I couldn't agree with you more.
It is in long term. That's the only choice we have. Is a more like the free market isn't going to help us. Like, we've had that over the last 40 years, and the paradigm is going to change. Where it changes to and how long it takes is a question. But most people in the younger people are sick of the economic status quo. They do want to be able to afford a home, and capitalism, a free market, isn't going to solve the housing crisis. It ain't. It ain't by any measure of the time. He knows that, but he has to act like it will. And yeah, you will see that economic paradigm move to the left because there's only so far you can push people into poverty and inequality.
However, you've got to look at it from their point of view, which is, I've always been looked after.
Yeah.
I quite like it, actually.
Yeah.
It's quite nice.
God, it just shows you how out of touch these guys are. So many people in the UK who work need housing benefits, like universal income to top up their wages. So, like, half the people who work in the UK are on benefits. Like, they're just so out of touch. They don't know how the average person in the UK is making choices between heating and eating. How poor we are outside of London. They live in their London bubble. They don't know how people are struggling, and young people like have no future. But there, it's like, it's fine. We just need to cut taxes, cut regulation, smaller government. Like, that ain't gonna help anybody but the wealthy. But they're wealthy, so it doesn't matter.
It's quite warm, it's quite comfortable.
Tax the rich. Yeah.
I want to continue to be looked after.
Yeah, but
Oh my
problem with
God.
this is, and this is just
People don't want to be looked after. They want to be paid a fair wage for their hard work. They want to be able to afford a home. They want to be able to afford a holiday at least once and not twice a year. They want to be able to pay for their kids' university. They want a future for their children. But these guys aren't offering anything. What have they offered? Like reform. really going to make people's lives better? Donald Trump? Like, it's delusional. It's sad. It's really just sad. It saddens me that we're in this position where I've got to argue the fact that maybe the wealthy have got too much money. Maybe they can share it around a little bit. Maybe we should tax the rich. Like, this is a modest proposal in many ways, that people with all the money can give it to us little peasants. Oh, it drives me insane. It drives me insane. I'm going to end there because I'm going to go and cry in the shower. Hit the like button. Do you have hope for the UK? At the moment, I don't, but in the long run, I do. But things are going to maybe get worse before they get better. So, with that said, hit the like button and I'll see you next time.